Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the distinguished scholars and delegates who's joining us from different parts of the world. Yes, it is a great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the JHTM 2025 webinar series. Yep, my name is Professor Edmund Goh. I'm the Assistant Dean of Research and Innovation at the Abu Dhabi Hospitality Academy at Les Roches. Yep. And I'm also the associate editor of JHTM. So I thought maybe before we begin this exciting session, I just wanted to do a quick promotion about our journal. Yep. So JHTM, as you know, is the official journal of COTI. In fact, we are one of the oldest hospitality journals out there. Last year, we celebrated our 30th anniversary. So the JHTM is committed to publishing a range of topics, including travel and tourism, leisure and recreational studies. Yeah. So JHTM is ranked Q1, and under ABDC we are A, and we are ranked within the top 10 journals in hospitality and tourism. Yep. So once again, thank you for all your support to JHTM over the years. In fact, we actually get about somewhere close to 2,000 submissions annually. So thank you to everyone who has been part of this journey as a reviewer, author, and editorial board members. So please continue to submit your quality transcripts to JHTM. Yeah, we are always on the lookout for quality manuscripts. Yeah. So as part of our 2025 JHTM webinar series, we have 7 exciting webinars, yep, for this year. And we are very lucky because today's theme is one of the most exciting sessions, in my opinion. I'm biased. So we are looking at authentic learning, precarity, future workforce paradigms, and future research directions. Yep. So why is this topic so relevant to JHTM? Some may be asking them. So over the past decades, the hospitality workforce landscape has seen significant changes from the emergence of authentic learning, Generation Z workers, the gig economy, mental health and well-being, service automation, and obviously and recent AI evolution. However, the workforce shortage in hospitality is still a perennial and pertinent issue. So after 40 years of hospitality research, this is still an issue. So therefore, this really begs the question about how can we better prepare hospitality graduates to enter an ever-changing workforce paradigm, the ugly realities of the industry, and future research directions that we should be focusing on in hospitality workforce research. So to answer this very important question, we have invited 4 distinguished experts in hospitality workforce research. Yep. The first 3 panelists will present for 10 to 15 minutes, and we will leave some time for Q&A at the end. And the last presentation will be in a form of a fireside interview session with me. Yeah. So we have 4 exciting panelists. First, we have Dr. Eliza Kitchen from Flinders Uni, talking about preparing the future generation of students, yep, through authentic learning. And then we have the second panelist, Associate Professor Yi Zhang from the Florida Atlantic Uni. Yep, she'll be focusing on the emergence of new work paradigms in tourism and hospitality. And then we have our third panelist, Professor Richard Robinson from Northumbria University in Newcastle, UK, whereby he's looking at the precarity and hospitality work and the challenges and opportunities. And the last, we have this interview with our 4th panelist, Professor Fezi Okumus from the University of Central Florida, who will be discussing about future directions and trends in hospitality workforce research. So I guess as time is of the essence, I guess it's my pleasure to introduce our very first speaker. Yep, her name is Dr. Eliza Kitchen. I will give a brief introduction about her. And in the meantime, she can start sharing her slides. Yeah. So yeah, Dr. Eliza Kitchen, she specializes in event design, graduate outcomes, and learning design of hospitality and tourism curriculum. She is an advanced HE fellow and was honored with the Gold Cutting Edge Research Award from the Event Management Journal. Her passion for the field drives her commitment to shaping the next generation of tourism and event professionals. Today, Dr. Kitchen will be presenting on preparing the future tourism, hospitality, and events workforce through authentic learning, where she will explore the use of authentic learning and standards to better prepare students for the industry. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kitchen. There you go.
Okay, thank you for that lovely introduction, Edmund. Welcome everyone. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. So I'm coming to you from Adelaide in South Australia, so it's evening for me. So hopefully I will stay awake during this, but thanks for joining at this time. Before I begin my presentation, in Australia, it is quite a tradition to acknowledge the lands of the First Nations people that we're on. So I would like to acknowledge that I am coming to you from Kaurna land and that Flinders University operates across a number of different lands of our traditional owners of their lands. So just paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So in my presentation today, I'm going to start by exploring why we need to create job-ready graduates and where some of the gaps and issues are currently. I'm then going to explore the role of authentic learning and what this means and how we can apply it. And I'm last of all going to talk through some findings of a recent study that was conducted with some co-authors of mine and how we use that to create a framework for educators. So the aim of this is to provide some really good examples for hospitality graduates and teachers in that field, as well as tourism and events educators as well. So in terms of creating job-ready graduates, what we have seen in the past is that there can be that struggle to gain relevant employment once graduates finish. And of course, as educators, we don't want that to be the case. We want our graduates to go on and secure employment in the field that they are wanting to work in. So seeing some of these statistics is quite alarming, even though we are seeing, there is a skills shortage in terms of hospitality in particular. We still can see that there is some difference between what graduates are coming out with in terms of skills and what industry are wanting. Whilst at the same time, we're also recognising that there are challenges within certain industries like hospitality. We do face issues such as high turnover, and part of that is due to a bit of a disconnect between student expectations and what the industry is actually like. So part of that is really trying to, again, bridge that gap and really illustrate to students what the industry is like by giving them those opportunities to experience it whilst doing their program. And another thing is around the employer expectations. And I think this is no surprise to anyone, the fact that there is often reported differences between what employers expect graduates to have in terms of their skills and knowledge compared to what institutions find relevant for their curriculum. So again, trying to make sure that we're bridging that gap. And then lastly, another piece of the puzzle in terms of the environment that we're looking at, the industry, is the fact that we do see continuous change, global and technological shifts, which again, change how we approach things. And so we're having to adapt to some of that to make sure our graduates are as future ready as possible. Even in the last couple of years, we've seen huge change in terms of artificial intelligence. It feels like pretty much every day there's some new development and some new insights around that. So again, it's thinking about how do we really keep on top of that and keep adaptable to enable our students to get the best education as possible and to really be mindful of what is happening in industry. So to talk a little bit around authentic learning, I wanted to define this and bring in some really key authors who have talked about this in the past. Some of you may be more familiar with the term authentic assessment as being sort of those real life assessment pieces. Authentic learning breaks it down a little bit further in establishing the fact that we do need to have authentic learning that leads up to those authentic assessments. So authentic learning can take place in every session or a number of sessions that we might have with our students. So if we think about how we conceptualize authentic learning, this first note there by these authors, in the case, Gibney and Crane, talk about how it transforms the educator's role from simply being the dispenser of knowledge to more of a facilitator. So it's less of the sort of sage on the stage approach where we're standing at the front of the classroom saying, this is what you need to know, but it's really working with our students a little bit further, encouraging them to explore and really engage in that sort of deeper level of thinking. And you'll see the second point there around the constructivist approach. So again, this kind of reinforces that notion that it's really about knowledge being co-constructed through a very student-centered approach where, there is that negotiation, there is that shared responsibility. It's about all parties in that classroom environment, not just dispensing knowledge from the educator to the students. And then this last definition by Yeoman is very well used in terms of talking about authentic learning, especially within the tourism, hospitality and events context. And he talks about knowledge is constructed, real and negotiated. It's part of this learning process which is facilitated and involves real world and complex problems. So again, there's that sort of notion of the real world context that's really quite apparent within authentic learning. We want our students to be exposed to what's happening in the real world, in the industry, so they gain more awareness of what that is and how to go about those scenarios. So the role of authentic learning is really embracing the industry relevant aspect of teaching, and within the hospitality field in particular, sort of thinking about how can we make sure that we're bringing the industry into our classroom environment, or vice versa, bringing our classroom to the industry. So that's really the central aspect of authentic learning. It's also about thinking of how we adapt to some of the dynamic changes within the industry. So how do we make sure that our students are aware of what is happening, the changes, and incorporating new industry needs into the classroom as well. What we have found is that relationship between theory and practice can be quite beneficial. It's beneficial for the students, for the industry, and some of these authors in the past, so Garcia and Rossell and Harpier, have found that it has a regional and national economic impact when we do link the theory and practice as well. It is helping to develop both soft and hard skills, and it encourages deeper thinking and reflection as well. So there's, again, lots of arguments why authentic learning is a positive way that we can really try and bridge that gap between industry and academia. So now I want to talk a little bit around a recent study that I did with some co-authors. So you can see my co-authors listed on the slide here. And we span across a range of different locations, so a few different institutions in Australia, but also representing New Zealand, the UK, and at the time of study, the Netherlands as well. So what we were wanting to do with this study is really extend a current model, which was created by Knobloch, which was trying to demonstrate how we might go about authentic learning. And so we wanted to think about whether there are newer standards or how can we extend that so it really resonates with the current environment. And so we were exploring tourism, hospitality, and event educators' perceptions of authentic learning. So before I go on to talk about the methodology of our study, I just wanted to highlight the existing framework. So this was the original framework that we were wanting to extend. So you can see there are 3 different criteria with 4 different standards as part of those criteria. So we've got, first of all, the criteria of construction of knowledge and the fact that for educators, we want to encourage higher order thinking in our students. We've got disciplined inquiry as the second criteria with deep knowledge and substantive conversation. So in our discipline area, we want our students to graduate having a deep knowledge and understanding of the area, but also to have engaged with in-depth conversations with one another and teaching staff. And then the final criteria is value beyond school. And the standard there talks about the connection to the world beyond the classroom. So we want our students to have that lifelong learning and see the relevance of what they've done at during their program, and not just walk out the classroom and go, that's it, done. We want that to kind of be part of their everyday life is learning, and sort of that always adapting and sort of learning from their situations they're in. So what we did in terms of our study, it was a qualitative study where we did in-depth interviews. We ended up with 21 interviews from tourism, hospitality, and event educators from across Australia, New Zealand, the Netherlands, and Scotland. And what we did was we transcribed all those interviews and did a thematic analysis. There's a little bit more detail in our paper if you want to read about that. And we collected these interviews over a period of time because, as we all know, as academics, we're all quite busy. So trying to interview other educators is quite hard to track down sometimes. But yeah, so we did all those interviews and thematically analysed and gained their thoughts and perceptions around authentic learning to then see how the existing model could be updated to give us more guidance in terms of how we can instruct and how we can guide educators in providing authentic learning within their classroom environments. So what we ended up with is a model with 3 criteria still, but we ended up with 7 different standards. So it does differ from the original model. So just to go through this very quickly, under construction of knowledge, we ended up with 2 different standards within that one area. So we've got knowledge co-creation and scaffolding. So our discussion with educators really found that the learning is a co-creation process, but it's not just a dialogue between students and educators. It's actually a trialogue between students, educators, and the industry as well. And so really to have a truly authentic discovery of knowledge and construction of knowledge, we need to have all 3 parties working together. The other really significant thing in relation to this was the scaffolding. So the scaffolding of learning across degree years and how that can really enhance authenticity. So making sure that we are, starting with something a little bit smaller, like perhaps a guest speaker coming in from the industry, and then we scaffold a bit further to then go out into industry, do venue visits, for example, go to a hotel, explore all the different areas of hospitality within that hotel, for example. And then finally, within 3rd year level of study, it may be then going out and doing a placement or internship, for example, where the student takes, again, a little bit more ownership of that experience. The second standard within this is customising knowledge and experiences. So what we found from talking to our educators was that a lot of people were trying to tailor what they were talking about and what they were including in their classes towards the motivations of their students, and also thinking about the cultural context in which they're operating. Again, because each cohort can look slightly different in terms of how it's made up, the demographics, the cultural context. Each educator might do it slightly differently depending on that. The second criteria is discipline inquiry. So we broke this into two different standards. So we've got student engagement, so encouraging autonomy, reflection, and also experiential learning through things like field trips or simulations, and how that's used to boost engagement. Because at the end of the day, that's one of the really critical things we want. We want our students to engage in the learning process, because that way they gain more from it. And then the fourth one is around educator capability. So this is more inward focusing on the educators and really exploring the fact that educators need that industry exposure as well. So we need to be in touch with industry, know what is going on, be flexible in the way we can deliver things or focus on content. So we are incorporating the most recent occurrences within our teaching, but also demonstrating our own vulnerabilities sometimes. Sometimes that more personable approach for students, again, can be a strength, but also having that adaptability too. And then the last criteria was that value beyond school. And we've broken this into three different standards. So the first one being industry readiness. So involving those industry professionals, involving real world scenarios, helps to prepare students a bit more for employment. So when they go out into industry, it's not suddenly a surprise that, oh, is that the latest trend? Hopefully they would have been learning that as they went through their program. Sixth standard is real world problems. So students should tackle current industry challenges. And I think working with industry to try and address industry problems is always a bonus and a benefit for our communities that we work in as well. So for instance, it might be asking students to have a look and apply or suggest certain sustainable practices that might be beneficial in a hotel, for example. And then the last standard is meaningful connection. So building networks, collaborations, and realizing that the learning environment is a social one, and that is really quite important within the industries we work in. So in terms of the implications of this, in terms of the theoretical, it's really trying to modernize this framework in the current context in order to try and bridge that gap between academic theory and practice, and hopefully bringing us a little bit closer in terms of creating graduates who are industry ready. On a practical level, it provides a bit of a self-assessment tool for educators to be able to address and see, okay, am I doing all of these things? And it encourages educators to really think through the process that way, to think whether they do need to redesign, whether they do need to include more scaffolding or more real-world learning. So it's supporting graduate employability and industry adaptability as well. So just to kind of pull this all together and conclude, it's really about how we can use authentic learning practices to create more industry-ready graduates, to narrow that gap a bit further, but thinking about how we might scaffold it. So we're doing it kind of nicely, gently. We're doing it slowly, thinking about the appropriate aspects for the appropriate year levels, and really emphasizing the focus on co-creation of knowledge through active learning exchanges that can be beneficial for both students and educators as well. There's my list of references as well if you want to have a look. But yeah, any questions I would be more than happy to answer.
All right, thanks a lot, Eliza. That was a fantastic presentation. Obviously, touches on the very important aspects of preparing our graduates, especially about the role of authentic learning. I guess one of the things that we always think about is we assume that our curriculum and assessment design is authentic, but how authentic is authenticness? So I guess that's something we can discuss further in the Q&A sessions. But once again, thank you for the awesome presentation. And next, we're going to move on to our second speaker. We have Associate Professor Yi Zhang. Yep, she's with Florida Atlantic Uni. She specializes in transformational hospitality and tourism services, promoting the well-being of multi-stakeholders, including employees and business adaptations to emerging work trends in hospitality and tourism. Associate Professor Yi Zhang is Assistant Editor of the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Horizons and serves on the editorial boards of leading journals such as JTR, TM, and IJCHM. So today she will be speaking on the fascinating topic of the emergence of new work paradigms in tourism and hospitality. Please join me in welcoming Associate Professor Yi Zhang.
Thank you, Edmond, for the kind introduction. I'll share my content. Okay, yep. I think now it's, so you can see the screen, right?
Yes, yes, we can.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm so honored to be invited to join this webinar to share our recent research on the emerging new working paradigms in our industry. So in this research, we basically explore the complexity of the ongoing work paradigm shifts, and also we try to propose a novel approach to tackle this complexity and hopefully to improve the accuracy in understanding the driving mechanism as well as to forecast the future potential paradigm shifts. So what we do basically, first of all, we focus on 5 major paradigm shifts that's going on right now, such as the digital labor transformation, the increasing demand for work-life balance, the popularity of alternative work arrangements, specifically gig economy, as well as the disparity in gender and age. So we first synthesize the literature on each of these paradigms to identify what have been done and what have not. So we came up with 12 research gaps, and then we propose a CAS complex adaptive system-based approach to address these gaps. So to save the time, I may skip here and there, but I promise I can share the PowerPoint in case any of you want to learn more in details. So starting with digital labor transformation, so of course we want to understand how this cutting-edge technology, such as AI, IoT, has been transforming our labor structure and operations. So the existing research have done a lot to explore the benefits, the costs from doing so, and it, of course, enhance the efficiency, enhance the skill development for the workers, but also it enhance their stress level, the fear of being replaced by AI, for instance, and also the recruitment and the training cost for the businesses have been elevated. And plenty of research have explored what are the factors leading to the decisions or preference of employees wanting to adopt technologies. but something remains to be discussed or explored. For instance, what's the optimal level of technological integration into the work versus human labor to provide the best experience for every stakeholder, including employee, customer, and business, and community even in large. Also, besides looking to the personal factors, what about the organizational factors? What about the societal factors, culture factors that can lead to such decisions, lead to the effectiveness of digitalization of work? So these are the gaps to be filled. And also for in terms of work-life balancing paradigm, of course, we see more and more people caring about balancing their work and life duties, but having difficulties doing so because based on the research findings, most organizations still haven't done quite satisfactorily in terms of providing sufficient work-life support for their employees. While those proactive organizations to be able to do so, such as offer work-life separation strategies, helping them making ideals that customized to their individual needs, would definitely outwin others in terms of appealing to the potential labor force. But also the research, of course, have identified a range of factors that can really explain the effectiveness of such work-life supportive initiatives, ranging from personal values to organizational factors like culture, servant leadership, etc. But what remains to be studied is a more comprehensive analysis comparing these factors for their relative importance in determining whether a work-life supportive initiative is working or not. And also a more customized approach to decide for what demographic group or for people, employees in what values, what kind of ideals work for them better is still unanswered question. Oops. And also, sorry, I just tried to make sure it's not hiding under the screen. And alternative work arrangements, gig economy. Most studies have looked at the factors shaping the popularity of gig economy. Including but not limited to technological advances and people's demand for work-life balance. So that tells us why it's important to study these different paradigm shifts altogether due to their interdependence. And of course, the outcomes from gig economy is mixed, and it can be a facilitator of employment in hospitality and tourism, but it also can be a competitor to us for attracting the talents. But what remains to be studied is, first of all, how the gig economy can influence the broader stakeholder groups beyond the employees and organizations. And also, how about its broader social implications, such as the potential social evolution, whether it would redefine the social structures or exacerbating the income inequalities, etc. So these are some gaps to be studied too. And gender inequality, it persists in our industry still, despite the recent years' improvement in policies. It's both the organizational factors like policies and also social norms that's leading to the issue. And our educational institutions can also play important role in raising such related awareness. And because of it, it has caused very negative consequences to not only employees, especially female employees' health and career development, but also the businesses. They may not fully leverage the female talents for their innovation and performance. And for society, it's also a lack of economic efficiency due to the lack of full utilization of human capital. Despite the current studies into what's going on in the industry in terms of gender inequality and what are the influential factors, the more macro level implications has not been fully studied, like in terms of how it shape the society values and culture, and also how other stakeholders like customers and policy makers can do something about it has not been quite studied. And at last, the gender, not gender, like a generational issue. We do see more greater need, and also the trend of having younger generations involving in the industry, especially Gen Z, is a challenge and also opportunity to attract them to work for this industry. And for this, we have scholars studying the characteristics of the younger labor, their favorites, their dislikes, their weakness, strength. So, for instance, they have a particular concentration on work-life balance, and they want to have more regular feedback and career development opportunities. But also, it is observed that they do show a mismatch between their ambition and skills, which echo what Dr. Kitchen just talked about. How to get them future ready. And also, another challenge is how they see the job in hospitality and tourism as temporary, which is a major challenge that contribute to the current labor shortage. So for this, scholars have proposed to use different strategies to, appeal to this population, such as leveraging technologies, enhancing the communication to give them instant feedback all the time, and to offer more flexible policies to support their work-life balance. But still, something else can be explored, including how the other parties like educational institutions, policymakers, customers can what their roles in attracting this population to our industry, as well as how this demographic evolution could lead to some other macro level trends, like how it contributes to economic progress or how it may shift the societal perception of younger generations. So what's the role of our industry in propel these macro level changes? And overall, Dr. Baum actually has proposed the need to study multiple work paradigms at the same time due to their interconnection. And actually, Dr. Baum has proposed a multi-level support system for a more resilient and sustainable HR system in our industry. So to take a step further, we also propose the need to fully comprehend the complex mechanisms driving these parallel work paradigms so that we can better understand how to precisely planning accordingly. And also, I think it's important to have a connected view for these paradigms. For instance, the digital labor transformation can actually facilitate or inhibit work-life balance. So such interconnection has to be noted and accounted for to accurately understand what's going on. And there also is a need for a comparative view. So for the organizations with limited resources to adapt to one paradigm, which one should they focus on, which one should they prioritize? So overall, we propose there is a need for a comprehensive examination for how the different ongoing paradigms they interact with each other to shape our current industry ecosystem, and also the multi-level implications, not just personal, organizational, but also industrial, societal implications from these paradigm shifts should be studied. And the mechanism underlying these paradigm shifts and their impacts should be studied. So it's no longer a black box. So to resolve these issues, we propose the approach of complex adaptive system, which is a perfect fit for such issues because it basically studies how diverse agents, individuals would interact with each other and interact with the external environment, such as economic, technological, societal environment to make decisions, take actions, and accumulatively they shape a complex system like our HR system. So to achieve this end, we took 3 steps. We first proposed 5 tenets or principles to follow to conduct such case study of work paradigms properly, and then followed by a conceptual framework we synthesized from the literature as a relatively comprehensive foundation to substantiate our case investigation. And then we provide detailed guideline, methodological guideline to inform the audience how to do it, how to build the model and validate it. So for the sake of time, I wouldn't explain why for each of the tenets, but basically to conduct such research, we need to consider the diversity of stakeholders and individuals involved that build our work system. There are employees, there are customers, there are community members, there are educators with different values, priorities. This diversity has to be considered. And also the individuals would interact with each other, shape each other's decisions. Like employees would use word of mouth to inform each other about the job, and also customer would co-create the experience with the employees. So they would influence the work labor force as well. And tenet 2, it tells us it's important to keep in mind that each stakeholder, they would learn from the experience, they would adapt. So we need to know how long it takes for instance, each employee to decide to quit a job, to even migrate to another industry. So such historical learning process is important to consider. And third, there are a lot of nonlinear relationships to be considered to fully comprehend this system. We know in traditionally reductionist study tend to use simplistic assumptions like linear relationships, but in reality, most relationships can only be accurately captured with the non-linear relationships. For instance, there are feedback loops, there are tipping points that I will explain in a little bit. And those different work paradigms, they interdependent on each other, and hence such interdependence between agents and the paradigms need to be considered. And at last, for each system, in order for the system to be stable and healthy, the diversity of parties involved is necessary, and hence we advocate for the diversity of gender, for age, for different groups, for the technologies to build a stable system. Hence, the diversity of parties involved needs to be assessed for our work system. So what you see here is the comprehensive conceptual framework we came up with based on the literature on each paradigm. So we summarize 3 layers that play important roles in forming our hospitality and tourism work ecosystem. In the middle, you see the agents layers, which basically is composed by the stakeholders, different stakeholder groups, and the parties in each stakeholder group. So it shows different colors to indicate the diversity. So different agents have different values, and they interact with each other to make decisions and take actions. For instance, employees interact with business, with customers, with their educational institutes to make a choice, job choice. And for each party, you see they have their own attributes, like their values that determine their actions, which further determine their behavioral outcomes. And the outcomes further give feedback to their values. So it's a cycle of changes. It's a feedback loop. So that's something definitely needs to be captured with nonlinear relationship. So for this layer, it would further contribute to the shaping of work paradigm shifts, which is the top layer. And the paradigms that interact with each other would further influence the agent's behavior too. So that's another feedback loop. At last, the third layer is the environmental factors, such as economic environment, technological, cultural, political, social environments. These are not exhaustive, but just to demonstrate the macro level factors that may influence how the stakeholders make decisions and act, and which further channel to the paradigm shifts. Then the paradigm shifts would influence agents and further, hopefully, accumulate to positive environmental changes. So all these feedback loops need to be captured too. And you may think, okay, that's a lot of calculation, a lot of variables to be considered. How is that possible? That's why we introduced agent-based model as the tool, because of its significant computing power that is able to consider all the factors at once. And also because of that, it can address more than half of our gaps we just identified that concerns the macro level implications and the multi-stakeholder views. To just make it brief, I know the technological part, the technical part is usually boring. So just to put it simply, we first narrow down the scope of the question to determine which industry sector and location or business we want to study, and followed by identify the links you just saw in the conceptual framework, right? The relationship between the attributes, between the agents. We try to find from the empirical evidence and existing theories to support those links to find the numbers connecting those parts, such as what are the rules, each agent make decision, how they interact, and how they evolve over time. And then for the parameters we couldn't find the value from the existing literature, we need to do sensitivity analysis to identify which ones are most important, which ones are not. For the not important ones, we can set them randomly within plausible ranges. But for the essential ones, we need to find data, input and output data, such as employees' preference and the labor distribution across businesses as input and output to calibrate those essential parameters. And the longitudinal data would be necessary because we want to use half of the data for model building, half for validation. And ultimately, we can also use this model to conduct simulated experiments to control all the other parameters and only manipulate one of them to check the causal mechanism. For instance, by changing student knowledge on digital literacy, would that influence the labor distribution, labor digitalization, or like a work-life balance? So that would be some causal mechanism we can experiment based on the model. Mm-hmm. So basically, the theoretically.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, maybe
if you can. Other time.
Yeah, if you can wrap it up. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. Basically, it's just a novel approach, and we try to use this tool because it can identify a lot of the gaps that couldn't be possible with the reductionist approach, such as causal effect and more accuracy in predicting the future work paradigm shifts. And I will skip the future research questions. If you're interested in knowing what are the remaining empirical evidence we need to support this model, you can find it in our paper. We have a long table of questions still need to be answered. And at last, it's a very useful tool for practitioners too, because it's not only help them to guide them towards most possible future paradigm shift, identify what's the optimal combination of their HR strategies towards better outcomes, but also allow them to take a more holistic and long-term view instead of focus on one paradigm only or one stakeholder only. And they can also use it as a very cost-effective tool because they can experiment any potential HR strategies without implementing them first, which can save them tremendous cost. They can use this simulation tool to achieve that. So yeah, that's our research. Sorry for the fast pace. I noticed that I prepared too many slides, so yeah, pardon me if you missed some of the things I talked about.
Yep, not a problem. I mean, thanks a lot, Yi Cheng. I mean, that was a fantastic paper. I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's an excellent paper. I think one of the beauties about the paper and what you presented is really about the holistic perspective of it and how it can provide us with a very adaptive and reactive type of scenario whereby we're not depending on just one variable. There's multi-stakeholders involved in that, coming up with sort of a hospitality sort of workforce model. So once again, thank you very much, and we will leave some questions in the Q&A sessions for you. Yeah. All right. So moving on to our next speaker, we have Professor Richard Robinson, who holds a Vice Chancellor Fellowship from the Northumbria University in Newcastle. He is a leader in service work and employment. Richard's research investigates the tourism, hospitality, leisure, transport, retail, and welfare service sectors in the formal, gig, and grey economies, and explores themes such as fair, safe, and sustainable work, mental health, and well-being careers, and skills training and development. Today, he'll be discussing a very interesting topic about precarity and hospitality work, the challenges and opportunities. So let's welcome Professor Richard Robinson. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Edmund. Thank you for the invitation, the promotion and organisation, and the introduction. Is my slideshow sharing properly, or is it only the...
Yes, we can see very clear.
But is it the full presentation or only a... It's the full presentation?
No, it's the kind of the slideshow. Yeah.
And now?
Now, yes.
Oh, now, yes. Okay, no problem. Sorry, I'm working off two screens. Thank you. My presentation, unlike Eliza's and Yi Zhang's, is not empirical. I'm a critical scholar, and a lot of my work is quite advocacy-based, and I'd like to talk today about precarity. And as I was musing about this presentation, I thought of Malcolm. In a former life, I was a chef, and I had a really busy night coming up and thought I would benefit from an extra pair of hands. So I gave my casual chef Malcolm a call, and I said, Malcolm, could you come in and help us for 3 hours tonight? And he said, you know, look, chef, I'd really love to, but it's actually going to cost me more to drive in petrol and so on that I'm going to earn tonight. So I'm kindly going to have to decline. And I'd like you to leave that thought hanging as I keep talking today, because Malcolm very much is a metaphor, and Malcolm's metaphor is a response for the lived experience of many people in hospitality who I think much of our research actually overlooks. So here's a quick outline of how I'm going to structure my presentation today, but let's whiz straight into defining precarity or precariousness. So precarity and precariousness really entered the lexicon of social sciences via a Guy Standing, who wrote this book, The Precariat, a number of decades ago. And Guy Standing appropriated Marxist proletariat to describe a new underclass of people who, if they weren't paid attention to in our modern growing neoliberalist society, then they would be potentially be quite disruptive, and they could cause the same sorts of disruptions that the proletariat a couple of centuries ago did across Europe, Asia, and different parts of the world. And actually, Guy Standing's work has ended up being quite prophetic, because the left behind class is very attracted to the right-wing disruptions that we're now experiencing quite vividly across Europe, Brexit and post-Brexit UK, and of course in the UK. But it's not just in this sort of social and political sphere that we see precarity and precariousness come to life. It's actually a construct that we've increasingly seen a lot of work-based organizational psychologists pay a lot of attention to. And they define, well, as a paper that we recently published in the Journal of Vocational defined it, as a dynamic psychosocial conditioning arising from the interplay of socio-political, economic, historical and material factors alongside psychological experiences. So rather than it just being a social and economic or political issue, it's also now taking shape as something that's embedded in individual characteristics as a psychological construct. And just yesterday, actually, a PhD student that I'm supervising at the University of Georgia in America shared a paper with me where an eminent scholar has actually started modeling some of the characteristics of the psychosocial conditions, including things like job threat, meaningless, deprivation of basic needs, physical precarity, union backlash, and so on and so forth. So we can see that this is actually a much broader concept now, if we think about it in terms of the lived experiences of hospitality workers. So in short, scholars are agreeing that precarity is a condition created by an interdependence between work and life, whether that's flourishing or floundering. In hospitality, we have, since George Orwell's prophetic book back in the 1930s, got about 100 years worth of research that exposes the deep and persistent breaches of fair, decent, dignified work in hospitality. And recently I've been involved with an organisation called the Global Hospitality Research Alliance. If you Google them, you'll quickly find the webpage, who are actively conducting research to look at fair work conditions based around this concept of fair work that was developed at the Oxford Institute, which really revolves around these 5 factors that you see on the screen, and I won't talk about that now. But one of the reasons, I guess, why hospitality work has continued to promote precarity is that there's been an amount of ambivalence by policymakers and industry, because there's been a seemingly endless supply of labour, for example, youth, poorly educated people, migrants and refugees. And it doesn't take much imagination to realise that demographic changes and insular policy, international global policy at the moment is putting its brakes on some of those supply lines of endless labour. And I guess one of the narratives out there in terms of why people go to hospitality work and remain there, and this is highlighted in a lot of the research I've done on chefs actually, is that they're passionate about either their craft or they're passionate about giving hospitality to other people. But in reality, many people that work in hospitality lack real choices or real alternatives as to other industries that they could work in. So they get stuck, I guess. So moving on, some well-cited research that I produced with colleagues some time ago demonstrated from secondary data that tourism employment, rather than addressing precarious employment, actually sustains precarious employment and contributes to deep social cleavages and economic inequalities. And today we're talking about hospitality, but I'd like to remind you all that many of the jobs in tourism are directly related to hospitality, whether that's in accommodation and food and beverage, or even many of the services that provision, whether it's leisure events, stadiums, conventions, or even travel airlines and cruise liners. Many of the fundamental roles there are doing the basic functions of hospitality and or even mobilizing hospitality in a more abstract concept by being welcoming and so on. So many jobs in tourism, as I say, there are directly related to hospitality. Now, it was interesting listening to both Eliza and Yizang there, because this sort of brings home a point that I'm fairly passionate about, and that is that the International Labour Organization estimates that 64% of employment globally is in the informal economy. In terms of tourism/hospitality, we know that in developed economies, the informal economy ranges from anywhere between 10 and 25%. And this includes things like gig work, payment off the books, and even people who straddle between the formal and informal economy. And it's estimated that up to 80% of tourism jobs in the developing nations is actually comprised from the informal economy. So what are some of the other challenges? Well, fair, decent, dignified work is an extremely subjective term and very difficult and costly to address. A shameless plug here for a book that I've just been involved in producing, which really looks at many of these themes of fair, dignified work and unpacks them with empirical data. I'm actually a strong believer that technology, unlike a lot of the rhetoric that's being shared, is not the panacea to addressing precarity as a reality for many hospitality industries, partially because of what I mentioned before in terms of the predominance of the informal economy, but also because the vast majority of workers in hospitality and tourism do not work in multinational corporations or in large businesses, but they work in small, medium enterprises, in entrepreneurships and so on, which are almost entirely untouched by the academic research. And certainly there's only a very little amount of research that's conducted in the developing world. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. The industry also seems to be stuck in old tropes that turnover is very costly. They speak about hospitality as unskilled or low-skilled work, and we're bogged down with age-old concepts of people who do service having to be aesthetically beautiful or perform and look in a particular way. Some of the other challenges are that hospitality and tourism, as we saw by COVID-19, is highly vulnerable to shocks. And interestingly, just sharing some work with one of my former colleagues from the University of Queensland, Ya-Yen Sun, she demonstrated that during COVID-19, and this probably stands true for many other shocks and crises, is that it's actually the precarious or the vulnerable that are disproportionately negatively affected. And her study found that it was youth, women, and the uneducated that were disproportionately negatively affected in the tourism and hospitality workforces as well. There's a growing body of knowledge to show that organisations actually lack the locus of control over many functions, especially HR functions within an organisation. And they are, as Yi Zhang, I think in our last presentation, just spoke about, out there in the macrosphere where there's this diffusion of responsibility or control over who can actually control factors in the tourism workforce. So I think I'm crossing over on my notes and my slides a little bit, but in terms of opportunities, firstly, I'd like to see an overhaul of the both direct but also indirect predominance of the service paradigm in a lot of literature and the assumptions around that. And I say this on two counts. The first is that etymologically, the word service, unlike hospitality, comes from the Greek word servus, which essentially means slave. And from that, we get words like servitude, servants, and so on. And what people increasingly are looking for now is to build relationships with others rather than to be subjected to subordinate relationships to others. So I think this is a mindset that needs changing. And the second reason I think we should be critical of the service paradigm is that the benefits of the service paradigm and the service profit chain, if those of you who are familiar with it, all stand for the gain of the organisation as opposed to explicitly the people that work within it. Rather, I'm a big advocate for discovering pathways so that we can bring to life the essence of hospitality, of terms like welcome, unconditionality, obligation, reciprocity, and so on, where we can build equitable relationships between people. It was interesting when Eliza invoked the Indigenous acknowledgement, because increasingly a lot of scholars now are looking to the values of Indigenous people and some of those traditional values of how they build and respect relationships between each other. So I think that's something we should look to. The little quote there comes from a paper about refugees, and my insert there is organisations, and I wonder whether we should think more about how we can dignify and give self-respect to people so that in hospitality workplaces they feel as though they genuinely and authentically, to borrow a term from Eliza, can welcome guests into their lives, into their homes, or into their organisations. And I think we should also embrace bottom-up hospitality cultures. Previously, I did a lot of research and worked with a lot of big hospitality firms, and I saw time after time the failure of internal branding policies within large hoteliers that tried to impose from the top down organizational values or hospitable values, but never thought about actually cultivating those and embracing bottom-up cultures and embracing encouraging people to buy into that from the bottom up. So I'll be very brief about this one, but some of the opportunities are to create pathway programs for precarious people. I've done a lot of research with homeless people and people with disability, and being very careful to navigate neoliberal assumptions and about not using these people as pawns in somebody else's or stakeholder interests, but showing a genuine interest into uplifting them and using hospitality employment for that. And reconsidering hospitality as fundamental to community, a fulcrum of relationships, of belonging, unconditional exchange, and so on. And I'd just like to finish by showing this quote from Matthew Rycroft a few years ago, who was the UK ambassador to the UN. And he stated something which is paraphrased in many different ways, but a society is valued by how it treats its society, and this itself, or the vulnerable, and this is always a measure of humanity. There's nothing in there about organizational profit or performance and so on. It's about looking at the vulnerable around us and how we treat them. So I'll finish up there, Edmund, end my slideshow, and hopefully I've got some time back in the diary for you.
All right, thanks a lot, Richard. I really appreciate the research and work that you always do. You always bring out the bad and the ugly side of hospitality, which most of us don't really want to talk about, or we don't dare to talk about. And the chef Malcolm that you mentioned, I think we can all identify it as at some point of our life and career, we were once a chef Malcolm. So, so thanks for the great presentation. All right, the last panelist that we have will be an up-close session, discussion with Professor Fazif Okumus. Yep. So I'm just going to bring up his slide, or not his slide, but just going to share his background. Yep, slide here. Okay. Yeah, so Professor Fazif Okumus is the preeminent chair professor at University of Central Florida. He has over 330 publications. He is a world-renowned expert in hospitality workforce research with more than 32,000 citations. I think it's more than all of us on this panel here. He has been ranked the top 1% and 2% of researchers in the last 4 to 5 years. He is the editor-in-chief of IJCHM, JHTI, and JHTH. Today, I have the honor of interviewing him to actually share some insights and actually get him to divulge some of the future directions and Trends in Hospitality Workforce Research. So please join me in welcoming Professor Fazif Okamus. Yeah.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Greetings from Porto, Portugal. I'm attending a conference here, and I will be returning to Orlando, Florida tomorrow morning. Okay. I really enjoyed listening to all the previous speakers. They are all impressive, very good points. And I will be happy to answer some questions. And I must admit, I'm not an HR, human resources professor. My area is more strategic management and leadership. But because of my PhD students and colleagues, I have worked on research projects, published articles related to HR. And we also say, if you are a strategic management professor, you should be able to do everything: research, publish, teach, HR, finance, marketing, information technology as well. So because strategic management oversees almost everything, offers a holistic approach. And we also know competitive advantage now comes from HR, human resources management, talent management. So we must acknowledge that too. Okay. All right. Any questions, comments? I will be happy to answer.
Yeah. So I've collected a couple of questions here for you.
Okay.
So I guess maybe we can kind of start off with a very sort of open, sort of generic question. I guess, how would you characterize the current state of hospitality workforce research? Yep. From the papers that you have been seeing in your journal or in the sort of academic field of hospitality, are we actually addressing the most urgent workforce issues in the research that you have seen being published?
I will say yes or no. Yes, we have excellent researchers, and three of them are our panelists today, working on incredibly important topics and applying advanced research methods, and especially talent management, quiet quitting, all these areas have been very important, and also competitive advantage through talent management. Yes, but on the other hand, I see a lot of replication studies in HR and bringing all these several constructs together and then collecting data from employees or potential employees and looking at those, and like each study changes one or two constructs, factors, and then there is a new model and limited, very incremental contribution. So very few studies really are groundbreaking, but we have excellent. On the other hand, we have a handful of excellent researchers in human resources management, in hospitality and tourism. One other thing I like to see is how many of our hospitality and tourism professors are publishing, HR professors, let's say, in top tier HR journals, and how many of our faculty members, researchers attending top HR or management conferences outside hospitality and tourism. And these are important indicators. And I would also like to see our researchers serving on the editorial boards of top HR, human resources management, organizational behavior journals, editorial board as well. We should go beyond applying previously developed theories in other fields and start contributing to the generic field and make a bigger impact. And I see from business schools, HR departments, they collect data from our field, hotels, restaurants, and they publish in top tier journals. But yet we don't do that. So that this will be my initial comment suggestions about the current state of hospitality workforce research. So in short, yes, we are publishing good research. On the other hand, 80% of HR research are really replication studies, incremental, minimal contribution, and more or less, even without collecting data, empirical data, more or less the results. Okay. And one last thing, I don't want to see intention to leave anymore. I want to see really actual behavior in HR studies as well. Yes, Edmund, thank you.
Yeah, no, that was a very good response, and I've been making notes as well, just for my own benefit as well, because I like to look at the intentions. I guess my follow-up question is, you mentioned earlier on about, there are lots of studies just simply applying current theories, and they have a few additional sort of variables and construct, apply it, and wow, they get the new framework and so on. I guess it kind of links to my next question is, in terms of hospitality and maybe tourism sort of research, are we ambitious enough in terms of theoretical advancement? Because, I don't really see lots of grounded theory sort of studies that build theory, but rather there's lots of application and integration of theories to develop sort of new concepts. So are we ambitious enough in terms of being very theoretically sort of challenged in this hospitality research field?
In our field, we are ambitious, but overall, I don't think our scholars are that ambitious. Again, I will say the same thing. If you look at the hospitality and tourism research, in particular in HR, workforce development, our field has been a testing ground for testing existing theories and concepts. And can you name any theory developed by our scholars or extended theories, particularly from the hospitality and tourism field? I'm sure you can collect data from other fields, industries too. So it's better, again, I repeat myself, using multiple theories, come up with our own theories and contribute to the generic human resources management organization behavior. Like experience management concept, yes, Pine and Gilmer. I'm sure our earlier studies refer to those, but we have not come. I mean, they were fast before our researchers. They published that, and we highly cite in all studies. In short, yes, we are ambitious. We're doing a good job in our field, but to get more respect and recognition, we should go beyond hospitality and tourism field and develop our own theories, even extend the current methodologies and challenge. I like Richard's comment saying, challenging existing current thinking. So that will be really impressive for all of us. And in our field, we don't get much respect, although we have excellent researchers and very strong journals with high impact factors and recognitions and all other metrics. But still, hospitality and tourism researchers and research, we are not receiving our hard-earned respect and appreciation. So it's better we try our best and contribute not only hospitality and tourism, but the generic organizational behavior, human resources management. One last thing is, for example, I give Professor Anna Metilla. She's in service recovery, service design, and she's not only respected, appreciated, recognized in hospitality and tourism, but she's highly respected also in services marketing, in generic marketing as well. So we need more researchers like her, not only in services, but also in organization behavior. And the same thing applies to me. I try to publish in generic management journals, and I should be known not only in hospitality and tourism, but also in strategic management field with my own studies. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can assure you that you're definitely well known enough. So.
Yeah, but not in just also in strategic management. I cannot compete with Michael Porter, all right, or Barney or Henry Mintzberg, but at least I should be like maybe quarter of their recognition.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a very good point. So I know you definitely be more ambitious. I guess my next question, is, I mean, you can kind of see this coming as well, is with the rise of automation and AI. So I think we have seen a wave of different waves of sort of studies. At one stage there were lots of SEM studies, and now we see systematic reviews coming in, and automation AI seems to be the next big thing there. So I guess my question would be, with the rise of automation and AI, what sort of trends do you see emerging in hospitality workforce research, or just hospitality research in general? And
Okay.
are we publishing too much of this? It's like a fad, right? We just publish it for the next 5 years, then we move on. Like,
I have 2 big journals I'm editing and 1 baby journal. And believe me, half of submissions are all IT related, AI related. They may be HR and AI, maybe marketing, but mostly, all technology and AI in recent years. And a lot of studies about human and AI collaboration, like employees and AI robots interaction, robots and guest interactions we see, but also it is skill transformation. Even for professors, in 10 years' time, maybe our skill set will be different. Content creation to delivery and teaching and assessment and so forth. In hospitality and tourism, AI will transform many things. And then skill set, one requirement will be employees to be able to work with AI and robots and even repair, I don't know, and those. But on the other hand, many AI apps, robots may replace some jobs in hospitality, and there may be new jobs as well. So it's about workforce displacement, and then reskilling, upskilling, and also privacy, digital surveillance. And these are the hot topics, important topics in relation to automation and AI, I will say. And of course, we know scheduling, hiring, performance reviews, and recruitment, all these things, AI already playing a role, but there will be, I think, more and more, I think, issues related to these areas. All right. Thank you. Yes.
okay, very good. I guess I have one last question, because I know everyone's eager to have dinner or move on with the agenda. I guess my last question is, because given that our main target market of this webinar are really sort of the PhD students and ECRs, I mean, what sort of advice would you give ECRs in terms of the publishing strategies, or maybe the publishing sort of culture that we have? Because I think all of them are under this pressure to publish, and that's why maybe you might be seeing lots of application type of publications. So what sort of advice would you have for our ECR academics in terms of hospitality research? What sort of publishing strategies or your views on publishing?
I think this is we can recommend similar things, not just for HR researchers in our field, but all. First of all, research is a long journey, and we need to start somewhere. And first of all, we need to read and understand, have a really strong grasp of existing theories and concepts. And it doesn't happen by reading 2 books, 20 journal articles. It takes months and months and years, and identify and understand different schools of thoughts in the field and where you come. I think Richard was very clear explaining where he stands in terms of research, in terms of his methodologies and everything. We need to understand and have our own understanding of different methodologies, different concepts, and be able to defend ourselves first. That's the strong theoretical foundation. And I talked to some junior assistant professors or PhD students, and then I can clearly see they're working on a research, but they have not extensively read, and they don't have the in-depth grasp of different schools, different philosophies, and they know one or two research methods, but they just only know those methods, and there are new ones, and they just keep replicating. So number one, develop a strong theoretical foundation, really, really deep, like an iceberg. And then develop yourself and do not just focus on one method. Maybe we now strongly recommend mixed methods or multi-methods, multiple studies, and also don't jump from one topic to another. Continue developing yourself in one specific area and become an expert. If you're working on, let's say, AI, robots and human interactions, or quiet quitting and or talent management, continue working. Don't jump one study HR, one study is finance and those things. So become a well-known person. And one other thing is collaborate with the industry, with our industry partners, and also I don't mean politicians, but work with local authorities and how you can help. If it is restaurant association, hotel association, you have to connect with the industry and associations and so forth. And alumni also, our talk to them, work with them, and then listen. And these will be my humble suggestions for junior researchers and PhD students. It's a long-term journey, and one thing also, at each time they should have at least 3 projects, and then 3-4 submissions. And projects ethically should not be very similar. Please don't make mistakes of self-plagiarism. Every paper is like almost the same. And projects should be continuation, building on the previous ones. And one last thing is research ethics. Please obey research ethics. As an editor, sometimes we handle complaints and paper retractions. It's a very painful process, and ethics are incredibly important for all of us. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Franzi. I mean, that was really good advice. Even I think some of the advice I would really take on board myself. Yep. So thank you once again. Thank you again to Professor Okamers and the other panelists for your critical insights. Yep, into the hospitality workforce research. So what we will do now, we still have some time, and we will open up for some Q&A. Yep, and I think we have a couple of questions being asked in the chat box. Yep. So I'm just going to bring it up quickly. Yep. The first question we have is from Saloni. Yep, who is doing a PhD at Lincoln Uni. Yep. Her question was about considering the technology changes in AI is bringing to the workplace that may result in automation of various jobs, but more for the entry-level type of jobs. So how should we prepare graduates for adapting into this technological environment? So the question is really about the impact of AI and technology changes in hospitality workforce and how it is impacting, I guess, the entry type level of jobs in hospitality. I guess anyone like to take on this question? Impact of AI and technology on graduates entering the workforce in entry-level positions. Maybe Eliza, do you want to look at it from the authentic learning perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that question. I think it's a really good question. I think from the authentic learning perspective, it's really sort of drawing upon that notion of educator capability. So for ourselves as educators, we do need to sort of keep in touch with some of the technologies that are happening. So really sort of building those relationships with people in industry. So we are having these discussions about, okay, well, how are you using this within your workforce, within your organisation? because I find that that's kind of the first step. If we know how organizations are already using or intending to use it, then we can bring that back into the classroom and say to students, okay, this is how the industry are using this, and this is how we can respond to this. So I think a bit of a two-step process. Partially when you speak to people in industry, they're not always aware of all of the different technologies that are available either. I know I make a habit of going to a lot of industry events, and they're very much still in that point where they're talking about AI in a very like, hey, this is amazing, it's going to change our world, without necessarily thinking about the critical implications of it. So I think in terms of that, it's working with industry and potentially having our students working on projects with industry to see how we can critique and sort of think about how we use technology in a way that is still bringing the hospitality element to hospitality businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's excellent. So I think really it's about engaging more with industry, making sure that we actually know what are some of the trends out there, what are some of the AI tools that industry is using, so that we can bring it into the classroom. Yeah, no, I think that's a very practical and pragmatic type of authentic learning piece of work. Yeah. The second question we have is from Professor MJ Kim. Yeah. So her question is about how do you see AI and automation reshaping hospitality work paradigms while maintaining the human touch, yep, in the industry? Yep. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to take on this question. So it's really about AI again, seems to be very popular, and automation, and how is reshaping hospitality work paradigms, but still maintaining the human touch in the industry. Yeah, I think maybe it's about Yi Zhang's presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and a big question too. I'll try my best to share my thought on it. So basically, I feel it's more of an opportunity. Of course, also at the same time a challenge. But what I'm seeing it is, it's gonna change in different ways, but hopefully empowering our labor force than entirely replacing them. For instance, some ways I can see to fully leverage our human touches rather than replacing it is to, of course, reducing the routine tasks with those technologies. Like we already see the AI-powered chatbots, right, to handle the routine guest inquiries so that our guest staff can focus on the high empathy work, on the high impact work. So that can actually enhance their job identities to feel proud of what they're doing and enhance their sense of belongingness to our industry. On the other hand, we also see the robotic automation to replace more operational basic jobs. So we can replace the payroll work, inventory work with the technology, but with the staff also focus on more human touches for managing the employees. So yeah, I think in this way we can actually enhance our personable stuff, personable aspect of our jobs rather than waste our people's time on the less meaningful, tedious tasks. So accordingly, we would see the services to be enhanced too. So the AI, they can provide sufficient information for our staff to know what to recommend to the guests, what are the activities to do, like their preferences. But the delivery should still come from human, so that it's meaningful that way instead of coming from robots or the AI chatbots. So it can be a great collaboration to enhance experience for everyone, not only the customers but also the employees. But accordingly, we would see the education change too, right? It's not only about teaching employees the basic knowledge in hospitality, but also digital literacy, like how they can fix the AI bugs, to fix the issues in the AI and the human interactions, but also there will be more education, like Dr. Kishan mentioned, to teach them the human-centric skills, like how to be empathy, how to adapt to changes, how to resolve conflicts, etc. So yeah, I think it's going to be very many opportunities, but it means a lot of changes in our education and job structure for sure.
No, that's a very good response. And I think what you really touched upon is really about, it's not about taking on the jobs, but rather to actually coexist and to co-work, and how can we manage the AI to work for us rather than to replace us. So I think that's a very nice response that you gave. And the next question I have, I think this is more of a Richard's question. It says here, does technological advancements promote or reduces precarity in tourism and hospitality workplace, depending on how it has been adopted into the workplace? So I guess the question is about how technology advancements can promote or reduce precarity in the hospitality workspace.
Yeah, thanks, Edmund, and thank you for the question. I'll start out by saying that I don't know, and I think most of us don't know, and this is partly why this is such a hot topic. But I do have some reflections. Firstly, I prefer to use the term IA rather than AI, and this is popularized by E. Tusadai from Surrey University. And IA stands for intelligent automation, and so it captures a range of technologies, including AI. And I think why that change of definition is really useful is that we already have very invasive IAs governing a lot of hospitality work. So there's some emerging literature about how many workers in hospitality are actually managed by algorithms. So for example, we know about food delivery riders, for example, who get little messages that pop up that tell them where they need to pick up and where they need to drop off their next order. But also in a lot of hotels now, we have housekeepers who are walking around with iPads, and the iPads are talking to them all the time. They're not just telling them where to go in terms of which room they have to clean next, but if the algorithm detects that they're working a little bit slowly, then they have a sequence of motivational comments that they'll give to the worker. Oh, look, Lizzie, you seem to be getting a little bit slower there. You nearly finished this room and you've only got 2 to go, sort of thing. It doesn't take too much imagination to think about where this is going. And so when we think about AI replacing some of the more mundane tasks in hospitality, we also have to consider how AI or IA might actually create situations in where employees are actually losing a lot of their agency, a lot of their human touch. I can imagine where a front desk worker now would also have an iPad as a prompt. And they're wearing the uniform and everything else, and they're actually being told what to say to the customer. So yes, they're practicing those human skills, but all their agency and all their own volition and so on is being taken away and controlled by the technology. The further thought I had, which I introduced in my talk as well, is that we've got to think very clearly that it is only a small minority of the hospitality industry that has the economic and capital resources to actually invest in advanced technologies. So whilst it might be a phenomena in multinational corporation hotels and so on and so forth, the vast majority of the hospitality industry workforce is a long, long, long way away from even being touched by intelligent automation. And I guess I'd leave you with the thoughts that I think Fevzi introduced already. But there's many dimensions to how we can apply IA in the workforce. Some of it is in augmenting what we do, reskilling, and some of it's actually in labour substitution. And I feel I personally am a little bit disturbed about the labour substitution element of that, because that feeds into the precarity argument I was talking about before, where it threatens to leave behind a large cohort in society that don't have meaningful jobs that they can do and participate and contribute to society. I'll shut up.
Now that's a very good point. I guess, from what you're saying as well, I think technology could actually kind of create that further divide, between those that the haves and the have-nots. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess. All right, we have one last question, and I think this question is directed at Fevzi, from Professor MJ again. She's asking, how can the industry better collaborate with academia to bridge the gap between research insights and practical implementations? So it's between industry and academia, and how can we actually close the gap between them?
This is a $1 million question. All academics, we have been trying to answer this question and collaborate with the industry. It's two ways. What academics can do. How many of us have approached an industry partner saying, is there anything that we can work together? Is there anything I can help you? What issues you have keep you awake? Can we help you? And then also saying, we have this, can you come and guest lecture? Can you read my summary of my research? And then all these ideas, you can go and talk. I've been in Orlando for 20 years. The first 3 years, I attended every industry conference, meetings, many, and I still attend industry meetings and learn and listen. And I don't present myself as like I know everything. I listen to them and offer free seminars, free workshops, and then get to know each other and become friends, and they give us ideas. Also, there are industry HR conferences, not our like academic conferences. Attend those conferences, not only related to hospitality and tourism, but general HR conferences for practitioners, and you can attend those. And there are fairs, association meetings. So just we need to connect, and also look at key figures in your field, in the city where you are, in the country you are, and approach them, their HR departments or their managers, and try. If each professor has 1 or 2 good connections, it's enough for the school. One final comment from me. We have every hospitality and tourism school program or university, there are so many alumni, former graduates. Okay, they approach them and talk to them and say, let's work together. Give us, don't ask for things. You offer something first, maybe a discussion, a coffee, and what keeps them awake at night. And it's a long process. But I see many young scholars, they stay in their offices and collect data through platforms and limited connections with the industry. That is not the way moving forward. One other thing also, now AI and robots are becoming very, very important. Approach robot companies and then say, can we, I want to see your robots, attend their demonstrations and ask for a robot. If any hotels are using robots or any software, go and talk to them. I think it's up to us to connect. And yes, industry will not come because they're all often busy, or they find us boring, irrelevant as well. Okay, thank you. I need to run. I'm already late, but I will be happy to answer if there are some other questions as well. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, MJ. Keep in touch. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Fazli, for the
Betsy.
response.
Okay.
All right. I guess we have really come to the end, and I really wanted to thank everyone, for participating in our JHTM webinar today. I hope you have found the sessions insightful and enriching. So a special thank you to all our speakers for the valuable contributions and your encouragements as well. We hope you will continue to join us throughout the JHTM 2025 webinars. And please continue to support JHTM with your fantastic submissions of manuscripts. And we look forward to connecting with you again. All right.
Thank you.
Have
Edmund, you
day.
did a great job. Well done.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
Bye.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.